Incredible moment, police officer and his loyal German shepherd reveal the hidden truth of an investigation that rocks Willow Creek. Officer Jake Collins patrolled the familiar streets of Willow Creek, the dawn light illuminating the small Midwestern town he had vowed to protect. Beside him trotted Rex, his retired German shepherd, each step a reminder of their unyielding bond and shared commitment. Yet, in the fading glow of the camaraderie they once basked in, shadows of doubt crept in. Whispers echoed through the town, unsettling rumors about his department, casting a pall over everything he cherished. The very badge he wore felt heavy against his chest, a burden that both honored and haunted him. The air thickened with tension each time he passed familiar faces. Neighbors who once greeted him with warm smiles now glanced away, eyes filled with suspicion. The tightening knot in Jake's stomach grew as the petty thefts began to stack up, concern morphing into a gnawing dread. More than anything, the thought of betrayal wove itself into the fabric of his thoughts. Could he trust his colleagues, especially Officer Daniels, the mentor he revered? His mind raced at the idea, could someone he respected be complicit in wrongdoing? Jake often replayed the words spoken to him by his father, a former officer himself, "Integrity's all we have, son. Without it, what are we?" The truth felt murky, and he found himself drawn deeper into the web of unease. Duty clashed with loyalty, and each time he drew breath, the weight of his responsibilities bore down even harder. Should he air the emerging truth, putting the community he loved at risk of losing its faith in the very department tasked with safeguarding it? Or should he hide behind the badge, reinforcing a system that could very well be built on corruption? That Saturday evening, while patrolling alongside Rex, an inconspicuous alleyway caught Rex's attention. Following his instincts, Jake felt a pulse of dread, the kind that comes just before a storm. Rex led him further into the shadows, golden rays of light swallowed by darkness. Jake's heart raced as he understood the stakes. If evidence lay here, the truth could unravel something larger than he understood. The potential confrontation loomed. Could he continue to follow the path of ethics and duty without jeopardizing everything he fought for? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the shadows closed in, Jake squatted beside Rex, his loyal companion instinctively resting, seeming to sense the heavy turmoil coursing through Jake's veins. Pieces of information lay strewn across his mind, fragments of mistrust dancing between duty and loyalty. What if Rex, in his natural instinct, held the key? How could he betray his mentor while securing justice? A simmering anguish pulled at his insides, fueling the conflict. His breathing grew irregular, muscles tense as he reached for the daunting truth ahead. Each moment felt agonizingly stretched, revealing crumbling surfaces beneath the facade of calm. The alley whispered secrets while his heart hammered against his ribs like a desperate plea. The stakes were clear, yet the cost weighed heavier than ever. Would he trade the community's faith for unvarnished truth? Rex stood beside him, an unwavering support, as Jake teetered on the precipice of revelation, the shadows elongating behind him, blackening any hope of retreat. The piercing silence threatened to explode into action as he hesitated, heart racing in a world where loyalties could either shatter or be forged anew. Jake felt a chill wrap around him as the reality of his position weighed heavily. The sense of urgency began to crystallize. He was standing at a crossroads, where both his loyalty and integrity clamored for his attention. Rex shifted beside him, giving a comforting nudge that provided fleeting solace amid internal chaos. The moment was not just about what lay hidden in the shadows, but about what lay buried within him. The alley smelled of dampness and decay, a stark contrast to the vibrant life that normally surrounded Willow Creek. Each scent and sound pulled Jake deeper into his thoughts. He recalled the tight-knit community he had sworn to protect, the faces that had changed from trusting to wary. The day he put on the badge, he had envisioned a future filled with purpose and service. Now, he fought against a tide pulling him toward moral ambiguity. Taking a deep breath, he rose, determination shifting through him like electricity. What he discovered next would define not just his professional integrity, but his personal honor. Stepping carefully, Jake advanced into the dimly lit alley, his hands flexing at his sides, ready to confront whatever lay ahead. Rex, eager and alert, picked up the pace, his ears perking for any sound suggesting danger. Then, a low murmur reached Jake's ears, a voice, barely above a whisper. He paused, pressing himself against the damp bricks of the building. The words were indistinct, but the tone was unmistakable, conspiratorial and tense. His heart raced. In that moment, every ounce of doubt slipped away. There was something happening, something he needed to uncover. Jake's curiosity morphed into a plan. He was not simply a passive observer anymore. He needed clarity, and he would extract it, regardless of the cost. He slipped deeper into the shadows, pressing onward, the adrenaline fueling his every movement. The voices grew clearer, a jigsaw puzzle beckoning him to assemble its parts. He zeroed in on the conversation, straining to hear. "You have to make it disappear. No one can know," one voice urged, dripping with urgency. The other responded, a snare of apprehension in his tone. "What if Jake catches wind of this?" He's been sniffing around. Jake's stomach lurched, a mix of fear and exhilaration igniting within. His instincts screamed, they were hiding something crucial. The very truth he sought was clawing at the edges of relief and dread. Which officer were they talking about? Was Officer Daniels involved? Each second stretched like a taut string ready to snap, leaving him on the brink of revelation. Determined, he stepped further, careful to remain concealed. The conversation became clearer, names and allegations, whispers of transactions and corruption woven tightly together. Jake could only take this in, thinking about what every word meant for his career, and the very nature of the badge he wore. His mind raced with possibilities and implications. What if the rumors were not only whispers of gossip but the core of a burgeoning truth? The very thought of betrayal twisted like a knife in his gut. He couldn't shake the nagging fear of the ramifications. If he brought this to light, it could sever the bond between him and his colleagues, but if he didn't act, the integrity of his entire department hung in the balance. In that charged silence, a plan began to formulate within Jake, one that would test the boundaries of his moral compass and his commitment to truth. It was time to unearth every layer, face the risks, and decide whose side he truly stood on. Each revelation would shape his professional trajectory in ways he could have never envisioned. Just as he angled to catch a glimpse of the shadowy figures, a sudden noise startled him, footsteps nearing fast, cutting through the tension like a blade. Jake's heart leaped into overdrive. The moment of clarity was slipping away, but his resolve solidified. He needed to act quickly and take control of this unfolding truth. As Jake prepared to confront whatever was about to unfold, he understood one thing: there was no turning back from this path. The moment had arrived to face the darkness inside himself and the looming threat that could unravel everything he stood for. Would he rise to the occasion or let fear dictate his next move? The choice lingered, like the sound of footsteps closing in time to make his stand. Jake's throat tightened as the footsteps drew closer. Every instinct screamed at him to retreat, to hide from the storm building behind him, but he felt a flame of resolve igniting within. He was past the point of inaction. It was now or never. Peering through the darkness, he squinted to discern the shapes advancing toward him. Two figures emerged, their silhouettes sharp against the muted glow of the streetlight. Jake cursed himself for allowing fear to creep back in. Years of training flooded his thoughts, reminding him that fear could be a tool or a trap. As they moved closer, Jake could see their features, familiar faces he'd trusted. The realization hit hard: they weren't just colleagues, they were supposed to be his brothers in arms. "Did you hear that?" one of the men whispered, glancing around, scanning the shadows. Jake held his breath, heart hammering in his chest. He couldn't let them know he was here, not yet. He needed to find out just how deep the rot ran. What if Jake is already onto us? The other man said, his voice barely a murmur. Jake felt a chill creep down his spine. They were talking about him, not just in passing but with a sense of urgency that hinted at impending doom. We can't risk him finding out anything more. He'll ruin everything. Ruin everything. The words echoed painfully in Jake's mind. What were they hiding, and how pervasive was this corruption within the department he had once believed in? The badge had represented honor, trust, and commitment, yet here it felt tarnished by uncertainty and betrayal. He shifted slightly, readjusting his position, careful to remain concealed. The stakes were rising, he needed more information before taking action. If he jumped in now, it might backfire spectacularly. Better to gather intel, build his case first. I've got the evidence stashed away, the first man said, his voice dripping with anxiety. We can't let anyone find out. If they do, our careers are over. At least ensure Jake doesn't find out. You know he's always asking questions. With each passing second, Jake felt the walls of loyalty close in on him, encasing him in a discomforting fog. He had trusted these men, shared laughs, pursued justice side by side. Yet here they were, planning to hide something vast and treacherous right beneath the badge he wore. Suddenly, Rex, always attuned to shifts in energy, let out a low growl from where he stood, a fracture in Jake's carefully laid plans. The heads of the two men snapped in Rex's direction, and Jake knew his time was up. He felt adrenaline surge through him as he made a decision. He was stepping out of the shadows. Emerging from the alley's darkness, pulse racing, Jake faced the two men. Enough with the secrets, he demanded, his voice firmer than he felt. With Rex at his side, Jake dared a step forward, the growing light of confrontation illuminating the truth he was determined to unveil. The men froze, wide-eyed, clearly unprepared for Jake's sudden revelation of their awareness. Tension sizzled in the air, thickening the atmosphere around them. Jake could see their faces shift to a mix of panic and calculated calmness. We can talk about this, the second man offered, raising a hand, but Jake could already sense the deceit lining their words. He could no longer compromise who he was or what he believed in. What is going on here? You must have thought I would never find out. He pushed for answers, the weight of the moment crashing down upon him. Before the first man could respond, a deafening sound shattered the night, another set of footsteps pounding the pavement, accompanied by voices that pierced through the tension like an unwelcome announcement. Jake's heart raced once more as reality shifted in an instant. The sirens blared in the distance, growing closer, a harsh reminder that the world was shifting rapidly around him. He stood there, at the precipice where integrity met the looming consequence of betrayal, heart pounding as he faced down the uncertain allegiance of those he had trusted. Jake needed clarity now more than ever. The unfolding drama threatened to engulf not just his career but the very core of his identity. Would he defend the badge, or recognize the truth as the ultimate weapon against corruption? In the throes of that moment, he realized everything was about to change, and the choices he made in this intense confrontation would echo long into the future. But now, with time running out, would he have the courage to fight for what was right, or would the fear of losing everything silence the voice of integrity within him as the footsteps echoed closer, ushering in a storm he couldn't ignore? Jake's breath came in short, sharp bursts as the men before him narrowed their eyes, their faces contorting in a mix of fear and anger. The hard truth was that he had always known reaching this point would be a catalyst for change. He shifted, feeling the ever-watchful eyes of Rex at his side as his instincts churned. Every fiber of his being urged him to maintain his ground. He didn't just want answers, he needed them. Jake, the first man said, his voice trembling slightly, you don't know what you're getting into. Just walk away. Walk away. Jake spat, incredulity shooting through him. Had he wasted too many years in blind loyalty to men who would throw him to the wolves? I've already made my stand. You're not going to talk your way out of this. A moment hung thick between them, a palpable tension that crackled with the weight of decisions. Jake observed their shifts, the way they exchanged furtive glances that hinted at deep-seated anxiety. He realized that their fear didn't just stem from getting caught, they feared losing the power they seized. This wasn't just about him uncovering their secrets, it was about protecting their fragile empire built on deceit. The approaching sirens sliced through the tension, ringing like a countdown clock, igniting a surge of urgency within him. He couldn't hesitate. What evidence? He pressed. What did you stash away? What are you willing to risk to protect it? The second man stepped back, visibly flustered, the bravado he masked himself with evaporating. We didn't mean for it to come to this. It was just supposed to be a small what? Jake demanded, cutting him off. A small grift? A small betrayal? You put a stain on everything we fought for. He could feel his anger bubbling, the heat rising inside him, a potent mixture of sorrow and rage. He had dedicated his life to a system that now felt like a ruse, a cruel trick played on those who believed in justice. He couldn't let this sweep under the rug, not when the stakes were so high. Then, something clicked inside him as he realized he had a choice to make. Instead of confronting them solely in anger, he could leverage this moment into a strategy. You know that I'm not going to let this slide, Jake said, lowering his voice to a steely calm. But we can turn this into something else. You can help me bring the real culprits to justice if you tell me everything. The second man faltered, looking immediately conflicted. Jake, you don't understand what's at stake. You'll put yourself in danger. They won't just let you walk away. Danger is nothing new to me, Jake replied, even as the words echoed against the very walls of his self-doubt. But you need to think this is your chance to make things right. This isn't just about preservation. It's about accountability. For a heartbeat, Jake's resolve threatened to wobble, but the blinking lights in the distance served as a reminder of the impending reckoning. He contained his thoughts, ready for whatever move they made next. We need time to think, the first man said, his voice losing its authoritative edge. Time isn't a luxury we have, Jake shot back, pointing toward the approaching sirens. You either come clean now, or I'll make sure the truth comes out one way or another. And just like that, he found a renewed sense of purpose. He understood that honesty, while terrifying, was the only antidote to the poison of fear and corruption. They were standing at the precipice of a decision that could define them, one that could tear their allegiance apart or mend the frayed edges of their loyalty. But before the answer could fully form between them, the shadows of authority began engulfing the light. Uniformed officers flagged down the area, ready to assess the situation. Jake felt the tension surging as he realized he was still standing on the razor's edge, the crucial moment of truth loomed just ahead. As the figures neared, Jake locked eyes with the first man. He could sense the internal conflict, the choice to remain a coward or to unleash the truth. The air shimmered with possibility. Which path will you choose? He challenged, daring him to act. No matter the decision, Jake knew this was far from over. The ground had shifted beneath him, and the weight of the journey ahead tightened around him, igniting both fear and hope in equal measure. One thing became crystal clear: he had to prepare for the revelations that might shake the very foundation of their world. And as he turned, determined to navigate the storm ahead, Jake's instincts sharpened. The storm wasn't just coming, it was now. But in the eye of it, he would find clarity even if it cost him everything. The blaring sirens dulled into the background as the police officers surrounded the area, their authoritative presence establishing a stark contrast to the chaos swirling in Jake's mind. He stood there, heart racing, caught in a tempest of emotions. The moment of confrontation pushed him to a brink he hadn't anticipated, and he felt both exhilarated and terrified. As the officers moved in, Jake stole glances at the men before him, now visibly shaken. He realized that their earlier bravado had slipped, replaced by a desperate urgency that mirrored his own. If they were going to crack, he needed to maintain control of the situation. "Listen," he said, his voice just above a whisper, "the police are here. It's now or never. You can either step forward and help me expose the truth or let this end in chaos for everyone involved." His words hung heavily in the air, and for a moment, he wasn't sure if they'd even heard him. The tension was palpable, a suffocating shroud engulfing them. He saw doubt reflected in their eyes, a flicker of recognition that the stakes had escalated beyond their comprehension. The first man swallowed hard. Jake could see the struggle etched on his face. Behind the fear, Jake recognized something deeper: regret. "Jake," the first man finally muttered, voice low. "You don't know how deep this runs. They don't just let people walk away. Then we fight back," Jake replied, his assertiveness sharpening. "But we can't do it alone. I can't do it alone." Before they could respond, one of the officers approached, an imposing figure with a keen gaze. "What is going on here?" he barked, scanning the scene with a practiced eye, noting Jake's tense posture and the palpable unease among the men. Jake shifted his focus to the officer, aware that every second counted. "I have information about ongoing criminal activity involving these men," he said, feeling the gravitational pull of responsibility anchored in his words. "They can help apprehend the bigger players." A murmur rippled among the gathered officers. Jake could see them weighing the credibility of his plea. The tension coursed through his body. This was the moment to transform potential into action, to engage with authority rather than yielding to fear. "Are you ready to come clean?" he pressed, turning back to the two men, his resolve hardening like steel. "You wanted to protect yourselves, but now you have a chance to do something right." It was a gamble, a high-stakes bet on human decency. Jake could feel a small flicker of hope igniting within him. Perhaps there was still a shred of integrity left in them. He locked eyes with the first man, mentally pleading. Finally, a slight nod from the man signaled a reluctant acceptance. "All right," he said, voice trembling. "We'll talk. But you have to promise to protect us." "Yes." Jake echoed, the rush of adrenaline surging through him. "We'll make sure you're shielded. Just tell the truth." As the officer gestured for backup, Jake felt his heart pound even harder, his mind racing through the scenarios ahead. Would this lead to the accountability he craved? Or did this turn only open new doors to distrust and danger? With the first man beginning to divulge critical information, a part of Jake wondered how vastly his life had changed in such a short span. He was no longer a bystander. The game had shifted, and he was firmly in control of his narrative now. The weight of his choice clung to him, each revelation mottled with uncertainty but tinged with a potent sense of purpose. What he discovered as the first man spoke was just the beginning, and he braced himself against the tide of what might be unveiled. The revelations promised to stretch far deeper than just his immediate circle, a labyrinthine web involving higher powers that would test him in ways he had yet to grasp. Just as clarity began to crystallize amid the rush of adrenaline, an ominous thought crept in. What if the very forces he aimed to expose were listening? What if their watchful eyes were already upon him, ready to strike back at a moment's notice? With new urgency in his chest, Jake realized this wasn't just about accountability anymore, it was a battle for survival. He needed a plan, and fast, to navigate this ever-deepening darkness without losing himself in the process. As he listened intently, piecing together alliances, betrayals, and secrets, the one truth rang clear: every decision held the potential to fracture or fortify the fragile path ahead. And with that, he knew another choice loomed just beyond the horizon, one laden with risk yet brimming with the potential for redemption. Could he leverage these revelations to rally support where he needed it most, or would he become just another casualty in a war he wasn't prepared to fight? As the first man began sharing critical information, Jake felt a choking mix of hope and dread coiling in the pit of his stomach. Each name uttered held both promise and peril, echoing responsibility that weighed heavily on him. To transform the unmistakable tension in the air into something constructive, he needed more than just courage, he needed strategy. With officers now taking notes, Jake focused on the faces around him. He was surrounded by authority, yet he sensed a thin veneer of doubt lingered. There was a dangerous vulnerability in both the men he sought to save and the officers entrusting him to steer this narrative. Suddenly, Jake realized he needed to not just be a catalyst for change, but a strategist to navigate the treacherous waters ahead. Who else is involved? Jake interjected, steering the conversation. If we're going to expose them, I need to know what we're up against. The first man, visibly trembling, shared the names of influential players entrenched in the darkness. As the revelations spilled forth, past transgressions and present conspiracies began to intertwine, creating a startling image of an underground network intertwining with power. Each confession felt like a sword cutting through Jake's resolve, revealing layers of betrayal that he had only begun to comprehend. He absorbed the information like a sponge, determining which details could bolster their case and protect his newfound allies. The more they divulged, the clearer it became, these revelations extended far beyond the immediate threat. Jake grappled with the unsettling realization of his complicity in this broader web of deceit. Did such alliances necessitate compromises he wasn't willing to entertain? Think about the risk, Jake urged, his voice firm yet laced with concern. You need to ensure your protection while we pursue these leads. This information could not only help secure your safety but potentially provide the leverage we need against them. As the officers moved in to investigate further, urgency fused with determination ignited within him. He felt the pressure to develop a comprehensive plan solidifying in his mind, mapping out contingencies for every potential fallout. This wasn't just about exposing the truth anymore, this was a calculated fight against a perverse kind of criminality. With each word exchanged and every fearful glance shared, Jake could sense the shifting dynamics in the group. His leadership acumen was emerging, but he was also painfully aware that his own moral compass was being tested. The balances between right and wrong grew murky, especially knowing the potential consequences. As the police began to ask questions, Jake remained close, intercepting their inquiries with a deftness he hadn't known he possessed. Every piece of information he delivered needed to resonate with conviction, he could no longer afford to falter. After what felt like an eternity, the men exchanged glances of confirmation as the officer signaled for Jake to speak privately. Jake sighed heavily, absorbing the gravity of the situation. This was his moment to either enhance the paradigm shift they were embarking upon or risk unraveling the fragile thread holding their alliance together. There's more at play here, the officer said when they stepped away. If you've got something bigger, we need to address it properly. You could become a target, and we can't ensure your safety if we don't have every detail. His words churned internal conflict within Jake, who now stood poised on an unsettling precipice. He could feel the potential for greatness swirling just out of reach, the temptation to command a position of influence on one side, yet the danger of remaining entangled with forces that could consume him on the other. Could he allow himself to step fully into this role amidst the shadows that threatened to envelop him? The instinctual hesitation he felt rose with each beat of his heart. Would he be strong enough to lead, or would he become victim to the very game he sought to change? As he looked back at the men he had begun to trust, he knew another revelation awaited him, one that might unravel the threads he was trying so desperately to weave together. Could he confront the broader implications of this network while maintaining his integrity? The stakes were rising, and time was ticking away. With newfound resilience, he vowed to fortify his path forward, determined to navigate this labyrinth, but acutely aware that every step taken would demand sacrifices he had yet to fully fathom. Just as he formulated a flicker of a plan, Jake caught a glimpse of an imposing figure at the fringes of the chaos, a shadowy silhouette linked to the very power structures he aimed to expose. The time had come to face the embodiment of his fears directly. What awaited him in that confrontation might just determine not only his fate but that of everyone around him. Jake stood at the edge of his resolve, wrestling with the shadows that had begun to cast themselves over his mission. The figure he spotted loomed larger than life, with each passing second, it appeared less an abstraction and more a manifestation of the darker forces operating around him. He could feel his heart pounding in tandem with the pressure building within the room, where seconds felt like hours as lives hung in the balance. As his mind raced, he felt the tension in the air shift. The officer had emphasized the necessity of clarity. But clarity came at a cost. He was acutely aware that loyalty to the truth also meant confronting powerful adversaries who thrived on deception. Confronting them was not merely a matter of unearthing lies, it was about risking everything he had begun to nurture. "Jake," the officer urged softly, breaking through his spiraling thoughts. "If you know what you're dealing with, now's the time to be honest. We're building a case here, but I need your insights." Jake swallowed hard, the weight of his decision settling unaided in his chest. "This isn't just about the names you've heard. This goes deeper, much deeper." His voice faltered momentarily. "I've seen how these people operate. I've been part of this game, and to expose them, we must play it smarter and harder than they do." The officer studied him closely, a flicker of understanding catching his gaze. "Then we need evidence. Can you provide anything concrete, pictures, documentation? Anything that might keep you safe while we dismantle this network?" Jake felt the corners of his mind pull tight as he waded through the memories, conversations recorded in the darkest corners, texts exchanged under false identities. He had carefully orchestrated these connections, even nourished them to some extent, but had it all just been naive self-preservation? Did it make him complicit, or was it legitimate reconnaissance for a potential masterstroke? "I might have information, but it's not going to be easy," Jake stammered, drawing motivation into his voice like a lifeline. "I'll need a secure way to communicate, and we must ensure everyone involved knows the stakes." The officer nodded slowly, but Jake could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes, the same doubt that haunted the group of men now brimming with undiluted fear. The risk was palpable and sprawling. The line between loyalty and betrayal was beginning to blur in ways that made Jake question if he could forge ahead without sacrificing his integrity. "Trust me," he added, feeling the growing authority in his words. "I know how they think. I know how to get what we need." A surge of something deeper than fear ignited within him, a grit born from desperation but tempered by clarity. The more he grasped this sense of resolve, the more he realized he had to use every ounce of craftiness to build the trust needed to navigate this labyrinth, transforming him not just into a leader, but a strategist who could outplay the game. "Set the meeting," he instructed with newfound weight, projecting the confidence of someone who had suddenly grasped a formidable truth. In the ugly dance of accusation and deception, he would not only fight for himself but for those who had entrusted him with their truths. As Jake prepared to rally the remaining members of their fragile alliance, he couldn't shake the feeling that the darker figure at the edge of his consciousness was gathering strength, too. It watched, waiting, perhaps for the exact moment they cornered themselves. As his mind raced, the ominous thought emerged: what if their worst fears manifested into reality? What if pushing forward would trigger not liberation, but catastrophe? The confrontation felt inevitable, and the stakes immeasurable. With every step Jake took, he accepted the weight of his burgeoning role while wrestling with a nagging question: could he trust himself in the end? As he gathered what fledgling confidence he could muster, the burdens of each choice bore down on him anew, multiplying his resolve, yet magnifying his doubt. This strategic dance was just beginning. Soon he would be called to a reckoning that might define him. The battle he had envisioned stretched endlessly before him, and he couldn't help but feel that its outcome entwined not just with his purpose, but with the integrity that had, thus far, defined his life. Suddenly, the shadow he'd glimpsed earlier shifted ominously closer, a figure now distinct in the growing chaos, one whose arrival might just change the game forever. He steadied himself for confrontation, understanding that what awaited could change everything he had fought to build. Would he collapse under the pressure, or rise as the leader he desperately sought to become? Jake drew a steadying breath as he surveyed the faces of his new allies, each reflecting a mix of anxiety and faint hope. They were gathered as promised, the flickering fluorescent lights overhead creating an atmosphere that felt more like a battleground than a conference room. Yet amid the unease, a strangely invigorating clarity coursed through him, a realization that while uncertainty loomed, the potential for growth stretched beyond the confines of fear. "Listen up," Jake began, his voice steady and purposeful, each word carefully measured. "We're at a crucial juncture. This isn't just about gathering information, it's about redefining how we operate. We need to think 2 steps ahead of our adversaries and do so with a level of strategic foresight they never anticipate." He saw the skepticism flicker across some faces. Pulling them through this was no small task. They had each come from different backgrounds, united by circumstance rather than choice, and trust had not yet been established. In their eyes was a request for validation, their unspoken question lingering in the air: could Jake really navigate the murky depths of this treacherous game without losing himself in the process? "I know it's a lot to ask," he said, softening his tone but not losing the fire that had ignited in him, "but we cannot afford to be complacent. Every detail we share, every document I've compiled, all of it has a purpose. I studied their patterns, understood their strategies, and I assure you, we possess the necessary tools to turn the tide." Jake's words seemed to spark a flicker of something in the group, a tentative spark of hope. They had come seeking a guidance they hadn't found elsewhere. But what bubbled beneath the surface of his boldness was still a silent dread. What if their pursuit of justice would only uncover more peril? As he brushed aside his fears, Jake realized he was on the brink of transforming both their fates. Somewhere deep within him, the clarity he had sought began to shape itself into confidence. With each decision, he had seen pieces of himself emerge: a strategist, a leader, a man willing to bear the weight of others' trust. But that weight also bore the risk of his soul becoming an empty vessel. Was he becoming the man they needed him to be, or was he merely masking the turmoil brewing inside? "Let us set up a system for secure communication," Jake continued, pushing aside his doubts and zoning in on the challenges that lay ahead. "I'll establish encrypted lines, and we will meet regularly to assess what we've discovered. The moment we lose touch is the moment we become vulnerable." His voice resonated with the kind of authority that he hadn't anticipated could feel so genuine. Each nod of agreement from the group fortified his growing resolve. Could he be discovering skills within himself that had lain dormant, waiting for this very moment to awaken? As they delved into strategic planning, Jake could feel it, the intoxicating sensation of momentum building, of forging a bond with those around him. Ideas flowed freely, strategies weaved together like a complex tapestry. The officers listened, their skepticism melting into engagement, curiosity ignited by Jake's passionate conviction. Yet, lurking just beneath the surface of that newly forged alliance was the looming specter of betrayal. The darker figure he sensed earlier re-emerged in his mind, a reminder that trust was a fragile construct, particularly in such a high-stakes situation. Each forward motion felt heavy, bound with the impending weight of sacrifice. "Tonight is just the beginning," Jake stated, summoning the remnants of his earlier fearlessness. "But it's imperative we stay alert. Our enemies are clever, and the moment we show any sign of weakness could spell disaster." The group dispersed, the energy swirling like a tempest of purpose, yet uncertainty still clung to Jake. He stepped outside, where the night air was thick with tension. What awaited him around the next corner? His mind raced with possibilities, each one more foreboding than the last. One thing was clear: Jake now stood at a crossroads. Each step forward could elevate him as a leader or take him further down a path that could consume him completely. The battle that lay ahead wasn't just a physical confrontation, it was a war for his own essence, a struggle between the man he had been and the one he was striving to become. With the shadows lurking closer, Jake clenched his fists, the determination hardening. What awaited him was nothing less than the test of his character, and as the stakes climbed higher, every choice would reflect not just who he was, but who he might become in the eye of the storm. Suddenly, a piercing sound shattered the evening's stillness. It came from deep within the heart of the city, a clarion call signaling their adversary's movement. The time had come to face them. The air crackled with tension as Jake stepped back into the conference room, a sense of eager urgency propelling him forward. His heart hammered as he absorbed the implications of the sound that had shattered the night. It wasn't merely an alarm, it was a declaration, an invitation to the unknown chaos that awaited them. "Lock the doors and turn off the lights," Jake directed, his voice slicing through the room, re-establishing the focus that had momentarily wavered. "We don't want to attract any unwanted attention." Staring into the wide, startled eyes of his allies, he felt the weight of his authority settle on his shoulders. They were relying on him, and for the first time, he felt the shimmer of true leadership. As they complied, he quickly mapped their next steps in his mind. "We need to gain intelligence. Our enemies will reveal their movements if we understand their patterns, where they gather, how they communicate." The strategy unfolded organically, impulses transitioning into coherent plans, as though he were unlocking doors within himself that had been shut for far too long. But with this newfound empowerment came an unsettling realization. Each plan he crafted unraveled the potential for repercussions not just for himself, but for those around him. He had to ask himself, was he prepared to take that risk? The last thing he wanted was to lead them astray, to gamble with lives that hung in the balance. "I will lead the reconnaissance tasks," he declared, his eyes scanning the faces of the group. "We need to know what we're up against. I'll work with 2 others for security." "Any objections?" Silence met his question. Jake noted the tension. This group, once hesitant, was starting to align with him. In that moment, he felt a visceral connection, a thread weaving them together against the storm brewing outside. "Count me in," a voice piped up from the back. It was Sarah, an officer with fierce determination that belied her earlier doubts. Her commitment stirred a flicker of gratitude within him. "Great. Sarah, you and I will take point. Let us take a detailed underground route," Jake replied, suppressing the conflict that arose from acknowledging that he was already making tactical decisions that could lead them into danger. In that space where hope and fear merged, Jake found himself full of questions. As they prepared to leave the safety of the room, he had to confront what now spiraled within him, a growing unease. While his mind calculated strategies, the deeper layers whispered warnings. What if his visions of success were mere illusions, and he was leading them into a trap of his own making? As he and Sarah moved through the dimly lit corridors towards the exit, he exchanged glances with the other officers, their expressions a mixture of resolve and trepidation. Every step forward was like walking on a tightrope strung between certainty and despair. Once outside, the city loomed over them, shadows lengthening as they ventured into the unknown. The piercing sound still reverberated in his brain, a haunting echo encouraging him to push forward. But what of the obstacles ahead? The risk stood like a specter, whispering doubts into the echoing silence of the night. "Jake," Sarah nudged, pulling him from his thoughts. "Are you sure we can trust the intel?" The question hit him with profound impact. Could he trust himself? The answer felt elusive, slipping away like grains of sand. He had studied their foes, but could he trust his judgments? Each decision now risked not just failure but betrayal, a realization that both exhilarated and terrified him. "Trust is a fragile thing, Sarah," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We'll have to forge it in fire." As they reached their first position, a shudder of anticipation coursed through him. The weight of their actions bore down, tightening like a noose, but alongside it came an exhilarating rush of purpose. Each breath transformed into a reminder of his resolve, shaping who he was becoming in the crucible of this crisis. Suddenly, a flash of movement caught Jake's eye. Heart racing. Adrenaline pumping through his veins, he felt the call of confrontation beckoning him closer, a decisive turn in the direction of his destiny if only he could decipher what lay ahead. Just then, the unmistakable sound of hurried footsteps echoed from the alley behind them. The moment of truth was upon them, and Jake was ready. But little did he know that this encounter would unravel more than just plans, it would illuminate twists he had yet to consider, testing his resolve like never before. Jake stood at the entrance of the alley, his breath still heavy from the thrill of determination, yet an undercurrent of anxiety gnawed at him. The past months of confusion and chaotic loyalty were now replaced with a purposeful drive, grounded in clarity. He braced himself as he prepared to confront the figures emerging from the shadows, aware that each step forward marked the culmination of his transformation. "Stay alert," he whispered to Sarah, their shared experience solidifying a bond that had grown stronger through adversity. This wasn't just about personal stakes anymore, it was about dismantling a web of deceit and reclaiming the integrity of the badge he wore. He had finally come to understand that true valor was rooted in truth. The figures advanced, their features morphing from silhouettes to recognizable faces in the dim light. Jake's heart pounded as Officer Daniels, someone he had held in high regard, stepped forward. Seeing him now felt like holding a mirror to the conflict that had once roiled within him. "Jake, what are you doing here?" Daniels's voice dripped with a mix of surprise and suspicion. "Seeking the truth, Daniels," Jake replied, the weight of his newfound resolve ringing clear. He could feel Sarah's strong presence beside him, a silent reinforcer of his commitment to unveil the corruption that had infiltrated their ranks. "It ends here." "Ends? You don't know what you're getting into," Daniels warned, stepping closer, his expression a mix of concern and veiled threat. "You could ruin everything." With a surge of confidence, Jake took a step forward. "No, you've already ruined the trust we built. I won't stand idly by while our department is tainted by your greed." The words came forth, unvarnished and unyielding, an echo of the very transformation he had undergone since uncovering the dark truth behind his helplessness. Having come to terms with his previous insecurities, Jake realized he held the power to redefine his narrative. He could no longer allow fear or loyalty to blind him from accountability. The camaraderie they shared was shattered by the dishonesty darkening their core beliefs. "Jake, don't be hasty," Daniels pressed, trying to regain control of the situation. "Think about your career." Jake squared his shoulders, reflecting on everything he had sacrificed to stand for integrity. "My career is built on honesty. I refuse to cover for you or anyone else. We will expose the truth, and it will stop here." The tension hung heavily in the air, and Jake could see uncertainty flicker across Daniels's face, hinting at the cracks in his resolve. The moment hung suspended before them, a pause in which the truth of their choices was laid bare. Trust could no longer exist where deception reigned. Just then, Sarah stepped forward beside Jake, her voice resolute. "We're done protecting lies. You taught us to serve and protect the community, not betray it. If you're not with us, then you are against us." Each word echoed with clarity, solidifying the collective commitment that had ignited within the group. In that powerful exchange, sparks of realization flickered through Daniels. The recognition that what Jake had discovered was not just evidence of wrongdoing but also a harbinger of change. His outer facade began to crack, revealing a man torn between loyalty to his comrades and the ethical obligations that drew him back to duty. The break in the tension came as a new light illuminated the darkness surrounding them. "You're right," Daniels whispered, visibly shaken by the courage he perceived and the consequences of his actions. "They're using us, and I've been blind." Jake's heart surged with a mixture of triumph and relief. Trust could be rebuilt, but it would take humility and effort. Suddenly, it wasn't just his story anymore. It was Daniels's potential redemption interlinked with the cracks of corruption they had faced together. "Let us protect each other now," Jake proposed, extending a hand of understanding. "But we have to bring the truth to light." As the men exchanged glances, the air electrified with possibility. He realized that together they could shape their fates anew. They could dismantle the veil of deception entrenched within their ranks. Each revelation they built could restore faith throughout Willow Creek, no longer just a burden, but a shared responsibility. With that exchange, a shifting tide began to carry them toward their goal. Revelations were ushered in, evidence shared, alliances forged anew, and in that exchange of vulnerability, Jake found not only the confidence to expose the corruption but also a restorative trust that was earnest and steadfast. As dawn broke over Willow Creek, the weight of the past began to lift. The streets they once patrolled shrouded in clouds of uncertainty now glimmered with hope. In that light, Jake reveled in the growth that had come forth from adversity. He had faced fear and betrayal, and he emerged recognized, not just as an officer, but as a leader anew, someone capable of navigating the labyrinth of justice with integrity and unyielding resolve. And with steadfast commitment, he understood that the journey ahead would not just be about facing external truth, but also about continuing to champion the promise he envisioned when he first pinned on that badge. Now, I invite you to take the leap. You need to subscribe now to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that will surely inspire you to overcome your own battles. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm craving for these narratives. Comment below your reactions and theories about Jake's transformation and this riveting conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who you know could benefit from this powerful tale of courage and redemption. Your support means everything.